You want the facts? We want to share them with you. Together, we'll boldly unpack the deeper truths inside the real estate industry's most relevant issues. This is Getting Real with Rob. Here's your host, Rob Namfeld.
Hello and welcome to Getting Real with Rob. Today our special guest is Tim Minton, Executive Vice President of the North Carolina Home Builders Association. Welcome, Tim.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for making the trip over. As is customary with the beginning of these podcasts, we like to do our lightning round to get a little bit of knowledge, inside knowledge about our guests. So are you ready?
I hope so.
All right. Well, let's give it a shot. So we're going to ask you 5 or 6 questions. Starting with, what was your very first job in the industry?
My first job was actually working for the North Carolina Association of Realtors in 1991. That was a long time ago. I was their political director.
Wow. Okay. All right. And do you have a phobia?
I have, yes, actually, and it's strange to have it being here in Charlotte. My phobia actually is looking straight up at tall buildings. So my knees will literally start shaking if I look straight up at a tall building. So,
well, you'd actually do really well here in Charlotte. Everybody seems to have problems with height in buildings. So we'll get into that later. Yeah. What's your preference, texting or calling people?
That's a good question. I would say I would prefer to call, but obviously texting's a lot easier.
Okay. Fair. Were you a good student in grade school?
Yes. Unfortunately, yes, I was a good student. So it was, I took school very seriously when I was younger, but not when I got older.
I'm actually pretty similar there. And then lastly, what is your favorite music genre?
I would say the classics would be my favorite. So, I'm always enjoy things that were sung in the 70s and the 80s. That's kind of the classics now. Okay. It's, some people think the classics, the 50s or 40s, I guess, but now those are the classics.
Okay. I wasn't sure if we're going back to Bach and Strauss.
Right.
So before, and thank you for the lightning round. I think you did pretty well. Before we move on to our meaty discussion, we started off with jobs. I understand you had a pretty interesting job early on in your life. Can you expound on that a little bit?
I did. I was when I was attending University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. I did not do that well my freshman year, and so I thought maybe I had worked all through high school, that if I got a job that would keep me out of trouble, and it did. I ended up working at the funeral home there in Chapel Hill, and actually lived there as well.
At the funeral home,
yeah. So I use that excuse about how horrible my dating life was. It was because I lived at the funeral home, even though that was probably not the case. But yeah, it was. I literally had to carry a pager around, and the pager would go off, and I would be with a group of people and say, "Sorry, I have to go. Someone passed away." And so yeah, I was there for about 2.5 years, and the folks I worked with, they were great folks. They were all local folks, and interesting enough, most visitations are actually a big party. I mean, a lot of times it's families that haven't gotten together for a while, and so it was. I used to say if I could sell drinks at these, I'd make a lot of money. So, but yeah, that was the sort of the secret job that most people don't know about.
Interesting. I actually transported tissue samples when I was in LA for a couple of years. So I used to drive around in my Mustang convertible and take tissue samples of colon, things like that. So I see some similarities here, Tim.
I would take them to the airport actually, because the medical examiner's office is actually in Chapel Hill. So we used to call them ship outs. Okay. And so I would actually take the ones that were going to go to other places to the airport all the time.
Okay. All right. Well, enough about dead bodies and tissue samples. Let's move on.
Let's go into politics. It's about the same.
There you go. That's true. Fair. So tell us a little about your responsibilities as Executive Vice President at NCHBA. What are you into these days, and tell us about your staff and kind of how that works.
Yeah, we are the largest state home builders association in the country. We're getting ready to hit 15,000 members again, so we're very excited about that.
Great.
And sort of our main 3 functions are advocacy, education, and some events. And obviously, advocacy is our biggest sort of top priority.
As it should be.
Yeah, it should be. And we have a great team of folks in Raleigh that represent our builders, not only at the General Assembly, but other things that we do. I mean, we're the largest provider of continuing education in the state for general contractors. And so we're always looking at new things to do. I view part of my job is just try to think ahead terms of an organization. Where do we need to be next? Where do we need to be positioned? Do we have the right people to do what we need to do? And I would say right now we have some just amazing folks in place that just do a phenomenal job for our members.
That's great. Well, you have been a powerhouse for some time, certainly in Raleigh and on the state level. Tell us a little bit about the interplay between. I understand the Home Builders Association is really 3 different entities: the national, state, and local. Can you tell us a little bit about the interplay between those different groups and how that works and how you get to positive outcomes as a result?
Yeah, I really like the way the organization is structured, because that way it kind of forces all 3 areas to work together. And so you're looking at it from the sort of advocacy standpoint, you have a lot of policies that could either start at the local level or created local level, and then we're dealing with them at the state level, and then even also at the federal level. And so it's important that these 3 levels work together to make sure our members are in the best position they can be to build homes. And, the Charlotte area, the Charlotte market's always got challenges. And so the Charlotte Home Builders Association is dealing with those challenges. REBIC's dealing with those challenges. Mm-hmm. And then at the state level, a lot of regulatory challenges our members deal with are happening at the state level. So that's where we jump in. And then, if you look at what's going on in Washington now, there's a lot of policy that's trying to be pushed down at the state level. And so our national association becomes very critical to try to stop those things. And they get involved in a lot of lawsuits. The waters of the U.S. and, there was a huge wetlands case that just happened recently.
That's a significant victory, right?
Significant. And so I think part of the challenge is educating our members on some of these positive impacts that we're able to help happen, whether it's at the local level, the state level, or the federal level. But having those 3 together and working together is critical for our success.
So you've been a lobbyist for a while. Tell us about the day in life of a lobbyist.
Well, a day in the life of a lobbyist, I could tell you what most people think, and then I'll tell you exactly, sort of what happens. You have to have unbelievable patience, because lobbying is about people, and it's about communicating with people, and it's about communicating what your group you represent, what their position may be on a particular issue. And we are a firm believer in trying to do it face to face. And so trying to track down legislators, trying to reach each one prior to a bill being heard or a bill being calendared can be a challenge. And we'll talk to not just those that we know we think will be in favor of it, but those that are opposed to it. And as part of that conversation, we'll let the legislators know, what the other side, their position is on this. And I think that kind of makes us unique in this field, because we want them to feel comfortable when they're making a decision that they're making the right decision. And so to me, it's the only kids game adults can play. It's obviously political in nature. And for us, what's been nice, especially the last couple of years, is we've had several builders get into the legislature. So now when the General Assembly, when they go into caucus, where each party will basically go behind closed doors and talk about issues, we've got somebody in the room that can explain a home building issue to the group that's there. And that's very important, because a lot of times they're making that decision while they're in the caucus, exactly what they're going to do. And so that's really just strengthened our position when we're dealing with legislative issues.
That's great. So what did you do to kind of hone your skills to do this kind of job? And would you say every day is different? Is that fair?
I would say the funeral home probably prepared me for it better than any other job.
Well stated. Stated. I think we're done here.
Yes, I think we're done. So sometimes I do think I'm back at the funeral home, but it's funny. It's not like you wake up one day and you're in the 8th grade and you go, I want to grow up and be a lobbyist. It just sort of, I started in the political arena doing political campaigns, and actually did one in Salisbury, not too far from here. And from that, just sort of was doing that. And actually a member of the Realtors Association had reached out to me saying they were looking for a political director. And when you're younger, campaigns are 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Mm-hmm. When you start to get a little bit older, that's not as much fun. And I realized I needed to kind of settle down a little bit. So I needed to have a little bit more stable job. So I wasn't looking for a job every 2 years or every year. And so I think that political experience really played well for me going into sort of the association work, doing the political, and then move it into more the lobbying aspect. Because it's all dealing with people. You're just dealing with people. And for me, dealing with legislators, I always say, where can I find that bridge, that connection? Whether it's something personal that, we both have daughters, or whether it's they know a member that I know really well, or where they're from is where I'm from. Those different connections. So for me, that sort of political experience played really well in becoming a lobbyist.
Oh, that's great. So, what would you say is your key agenda items then for this legislative session?
Oh, we've had just a quiet, non-controversial session this year.
That's what I've heard.
Yes, that's what I've heard. That's what I read in the paper every day.
No vetoes.
No vetoes at all. It's been an exciting session. I think every about 10 or 15 years we have a piece of legislation that we kind of say transforms what we're doing, and I think we've got that this year. House Bill 488, which basically deals with doing a reorganization of the Building Code Council, and then more importantly, stopping some of the things that the Building Code Council wants to do that's going to increase the cost of housing by over $20,000, and at least putting a pause on it till the new council can come in, and the new council be made up of folks who understand the industry, will look at affordability as part of the equation when they're looking at code.
It's important.
And the thing is, and this is where it's unfortunate, the Building Code Council and the code was designed for safety, health and safety. That's its purpose. But now it's shifted to more policy, political questions. And that's unfortunate, because homeowners shouldn't have to pay for a political question. And so dealing with the energy code, the new code that they're looking at will say, there's no question, it will probably save homeowners about $30 a month on their energy bill, but it's going to cost their mortgage about another $1,000 a month. So that is not a good trade-off.
No.
And so our hope is the governor's vetoed that bill, and our hope is soon the General Assembly is going to overturn that veto, and so we can get moving forward and make sure we position North Carolina the best. We've already had one veto override dealing with the Farm Bill. There was a wetlands provision in there that was very important to us.
That played into the WOTUS water of the United States thing, right?
It did, and it was not accidental, but we were actually kind of hoping the Farm Bill would happen before the Supreme Court made their ruling, because it actually added more intensity to what we were trying to do, and all we were doing was DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, had basically implemented some rules that were illegal. They went beyond their authority.
Oh, come on, that never happens, Tim.
Never, ever. I heard it was some city council one time, and their attorney, they asked them, was this legal? And their response was, it's legal till the courts say otherwise, and which was disappointing to hear, but that's, I think, the position some people take. Yes. And all this does is roll back to what it was before they tried to implement this rule. The world did not come to an end as everyone was claiming was going to happen. But then the ruling came out at the same time. And so the intensity of that just really became a focus. But the General Assembly overturned that veto. So that's now the law of North Carolina. So we're very excited about that. And there's one other sort of, there was a big bill dealing with wastewater, and it was huge for this region.
Yes.
Dealing with what we call gallons per day, the actual usage in a home.
Newton bill, right?
And so I was very excited to be a part of that, going down to Cabarrus, meeting with them to, kind of figure out a solution. This is not a perfect solution, but this is much better, and we still need to work on it some more. But this is kind of the first step. Wastewater and water supply issues are going to be, I think, huge for our members for the next 10 years. And so, and then lastly, there's a reg reform bill that's moving through that we feel probably the governor will probably veto that if it passes. And so we may get 3 opportunities for veto overrides this year, which would be fun.
What's in that reg reform bill? What would you say are the key elements that you're most interested in? Yeah,
I mean, there's some that are just very common sense. For example, stormwater. In this, if you're buying an existing property and you want to basically you're making some changes, you get credit for, the impervious surface.
Sure.
You're not going to get penalized for actually taking an old commercial structure, and now they're going to put all these new provisions in there as well. And I mean, for us, they're even minor things. And by the way, I don't know if you know this, but the word minimum now is greater than the word maximum. So that actually came from legislation last year that we were involved in, where the maximum a parking space can be is 9 feet by 20. But there's a local government that's minimum ordinance is 10 feet by 20. And they say they're in compliance with the law. So they reached out to the Institute of Government, which is kind of the group that oversees that, and they agreed with the local government that somehow 10 feet by 20 is not in violation of the law that says the maximum is 9 feet by 20. So there's a little provision there to clarify what the word maximum means. So that's kind of where we are now.
I'm a little speechless about that.
Yes.
I don't know what to make of that. Okay. Anything else legislatively for this year, or what are you kind of looking ahead to for next year?
Well, I mean, we've been very fortunate. A lot of our legislation's been able to move. I mean, I think there's been less than 100 bills have passed the General Assembly this session. So I think one of the things about lobbying people don't realize is how difficult it is to get a bill through. I speak to a group of Army captains each year, and I kind of explain the legislative process, and I use a football field. And I said, the goal is to score a touchdown. Well, if someone tackles you at the 50-yard line, your bill is dead. If someone tackles you at the 1 foot line, your bill is dead. And so it's very difficult to get legislation through, and it's designed that way. It's meant to work that way. Right. And so, for us, we're keeping a list of things that we're going to be looking at. I mean, unfortunately, our wonderful local governments always give us ideas. If some of them, not all of them, if just some of them would just actually follow the law, I think we would have to do a lot less legislation, but unfortunately there are just some that don't do that. And so we have to respond accordingly in terms of fixing that problem.
I can think of one in the region right now, Davidson, has a little bit of a housing affordability issue of their own making, frankly. But that's subject for another day.
Yes.
What would you say are the biggest differences, other than the fact that they put the capital in the wrong city? But what are the biggest differences between Charlotte and Raleigh?
Well, since I live in Clayton, you're right. It should be in Clayton, not in Raleigh. But, it's funny. I've actually lived in both cities. It's been a long time since I've lived here in Charlotte. But I've always described the two. Raleigh is a state government town. I mean, that's basically it's its main industry. It's everything's driven by that. Charlotte, much more financial sector, different things like that. And I used to say that in Raleigh, everyone went home at 5 o'clock. In Charlotte, everyone goes home at 6 o'clock. That's how you can tell the difference. I mean, it is funny. Traffic is harder here than it is in Raleigh, even though we're catching up. I mean, just because we're just having a huge growth spurt in the area. But I think Charlotte views itself more urban than Raleigh does. I mean, and obviously you got all the sports. All the sports teams that I think help from that standpoint. And I mean, I think North Carolina needs both to be successful. There's no question that having those two anchors in the state is one of the reasons we've had such great economic growth in the state. And so I think it's we still joke about the great state of Mecklenburg and the great state of Charlotte, but. I think it's Charlotte's a great city to visit, and I think the Panthers are going to do better this year. So I think hopefully you'll get a lot more visitors this year than you have in years past.
You mentioned the great state of Mecklenburg? I guess I've heard that a lot over the years that I've lived here. What steps can be taken by us folks here in the Charlotte region to kind of improve that relationship, I guess, with Raleigh? Because what happens in Raleigh impacts us directly at the General Assembly and otherwise. So what can we do?
It does. And I think the challenge that all cities are going to face now is we have this huge rural versus urban divide. And, legislators, especially, they represent their constituents, and, those who are going to be from rural areas see all the economic growth going to the big cities, and that they're not getting a chance to participate with that. Broadband's been a big issue, for example, and just rural areas being able to have access to broadband and some of the other things that are out there. And so, I think there's always going to be that tension that's there. And but there's no question that the cities is where the economic growth is really happening right now. And even from a housing standpoint, we're seeing that's where all the houses are being built, even though we're kind of seeing, I live in Johnston County, and if someone told me they'd be building 1,000 lot subdivision on the other side of I-95, I would have said there's no way, but that's happening now because that's how far out the growth is going.
Do you think that comes because people want to move to North Carolina? Good to do business. It's regulatorily, it's pretty positive, but they're moving away from places that have just gotten to be so difficult to live in and quality of life. Is that kind of how you see it, or are we more of a draw, or are people running from places?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. I do think, for example, the best and worst invention ever made was air conditioning. Air conditioning is great if you're from here, but it's worse because it brings everybody here. But I joke about the number of New York and New Jersey license plates I see in my little small town, and I think the state is positioned. I think being kind of halfway between Florida and New York is critical. I do think the regulatory environment in terms of the General Assembly's done a fantastic job on tax policy to make it much more open for companies to come to North Carolina. I think the universities have been a big driver. We have great universities. The entire state has great universities. And so having those young people come to North Carolina for school and then end up staying. And so I think all those things sort of drive. But I do think the cost of living here, I know people think housing's expensive, but it's still cheaper here than it is in a lot of places.
That's true.
And you see the migration from California, for example, going to Vegas, to Nevada, to Arizona, places like that, Montana. So, you're starting to see this sort of migration pattern where people, I think, now are much more mobile too. And so they can move a lot more easily. So, I don't see the growth stopping anytime soon.
Okay. So, what would you say the biggest challenge you face on a regular basis in your job? Yeah,
I think the biggest challenge is trying to help our members be successful. And it's a constant what I call whack-a-mole. It's like we feel like we've solved this problem over here, and then it pops up in a different way there. And just trying to sort through that. I think zoning, quite frankly, is going to be the biggest challenge as we move forward. I think this whole rezoning process that's basically used as a weapon now, where basically, you've got to sell your soul to get the project approved is not the right way to do things, not the right way to do business. And I understand why it happens, because you don't get your project approved otherwise.
Right.
It's to the point now that we could make, pick any topic illegal, and someone next week is going to agree to it as part of their development.
Right.
So why put it in the statute then? From that statute, from that standpoint. So we've got to really sit down. We've got to figure this problem out. And I think that's our biggest challenge moving forward is how do we solve this? Our members tell us they want to be able to negotiate, which I understand completely. But it's the problem is that when the doors even crack, the other side's going to open it wide open. And so how do we come up with some consistency or a process where you're treated fairly as you're going through trying to get that approval?
Seems like there needs to be better sideboards of some kind to kind of control that process. Well, let's talk about something really positive, which I'm actually really excited about. I'm excited to hear about. Be Pro, Be Proud. Tell us a little bit about that program.
Yeah, we're very excited. When I took this role as executive vice president, I wasn't sure how we could fit when it comes to sort of labor and training folks for the future, encourage them to get into the housing industry. And this project was actually started in Arkansas, and it's now in 7 states. They were coming to North Carolina. They asked us if we would run the program in North Carolina. They also threw in there the General Assembly is probably going to give you money to start the program.
Excellent.
So that was a nice incentive. And so I got to see South Carolina had a vehicle, so we got to see that. And it was just amazing. And so we were very excited. And basically what it is it's a mobile classroom. It's literally a semi-tractor trailer. And it literally goes to schools across North Carolina. We have 2 of them. And there are 11 virtual simulators that kids go through to encourage them to get into the industry. And for example, the plumbing one, you basically have a project where you have to cut a pipe out of the wall, which I failed the first 3 times, but at the end, it shows you how much money you're going to make based on that project. And so part of it is encouraging them to sign up, and then we can continue to send them information about the trades and literally how much money you could be making And so we rolled out the program in late October. We've already reached, I think, about 27,000 students, and about 2,500 of them have signed up. And so so I'm very excited. And the goal is about 40,000 a school year. We haven't had it a full school year yet. So 40,000 a school year. So that to me is a very positive way to impact the industry, and just seeing what I really am excited about is seeing all the young ladies who are going in and seeing this as a possible career choice, because I think that's the future of our organization is right there.
Well, that's great. You got to fill that void of the workforce.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Kind of along those lines, I think you've all been doing some scholarship work. Is that right?
Yeah, we expanded our scholarship program. So basically to where before we'd kind of focused more on one or two scholarships, and now we've expanded it, and we literally took the state, and we have 8 regions, and we're giving out scholarships to community colleges across the state. In fact, hope to give one here in the Charlotte market here today. So But this is the first year of the program. We ended up, our goal was to give out 8 scholarships. We gave out 19.
Wow.
And so we're very excited. And it's just, I'll tell you, I went to Nash Community College the other day to present a young man his scholarship. His parents showed up. The president of the community college came out. And as we're presenting it, he pointed to a water tower that was there. He's going to be a welder. And he was saying he was working on that water tower the day before. Wow. So it's just really neat to meet these young people and just see, as I tell them, how much money they're going to be making here soon, and that I think shows in a great career to for their future.
That's awesome. Well, what is REBIC members? What can we do to support your efforts? I know some of our REBIC members are NCHBA members. We're all part of the same family. What can we do to support your efforts on the state level?
Well, what y'all do is critical, and because we're not on the front line, we're in Raleigh, and so we don't see what's going on a day-to-day basis, and so we need organizations like yours to be here at the local level. One, hopefully, if the opportunity presents itself, to stop something at the local level, but that's where we get our legislative ideas from. And for the most part, a lot of times our members won't call us and tell us there's a problem. So we need you to let us know, so that way, and a lot of times we may need information regarding that problem. And so having your group here is critical for that success. And REBIC's been around a long, long time and been very successful. So we're proud to have that partnership with your group to be able to, help our members be, to be successul.
Well, Tim, thank you so much. Tim Minton, under promising, over delivering for the HBA and all of our members. Thanks very much for stopping in today.
And thank you.
Hopefully you won't be a stranger.
Yep. Sounds great. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Getting Real with Rob. This podcast is produced by the Real Estate and Building Industry Coalition in Charlotte, North Carolina. Learn more about us at REBIC.com. That's REBIC.com. We'll talk to you next time.